Now's the time to save 30% on wedding jewelry, only on BlueNile.com. Make sure your wedding ring is the one with your pick of diamond and lab-grown diamond bands, all hand-finished and graded for excellence. Or surprise her with something blue she'll love for life, like a stunning pair of sapphire earrings. Blue Nile's jewelry experts are available 24/7 to help, from fit questions to style advice. Right now, get up to 30% off at BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we have two juicy stories regarding Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams. Are the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk about to come to terms on a brand new deal? And Trent Williams wants a new deal. We're going to talk about both of those stories today because last Friday, up until this morning, we got a lot of news regarding two of the biggest stars on the San Francisco 49ers. I want to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's dive into today's show. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about Trent Williams. And we all know and love Trent Williams, going to be a Hall of Famer, if not the best left tackle in football. Easily number two. Laramie Tunsil's up there, and Trent Williams. Trent Williams is going to be a gold jacket wearer when it's all said and done. His legacy is already solidified, and the contract he currently has still is the highest for a left tackle in the National Football League. And when you have players like Trent Williams, you want to keep them happy. Now, Trent is a player that, one, again, is phenomenal, but two, is coming up on kind of the last leg of his career. And with that, there have been some rumblings, some discussions of, could this year be his last? Could it have been next year? Could it be in 2 years? Is he actually going to finish out his contract? Well, we got a report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler this weekend where he stated there are whispers around some in the industry that Niners Trent Williams might want a new deal eventually with the team. Now, I know what you're thinking. They got to pay Aiyuk. They just paid McCaffrey. They got to pay Brock Purdy. They have all these other stars they have to pay. Why is Trent Williams now wanting a brand new deal? What does this mean for the future of the roster? Well, I can in fact tell you that Trent Williams wanting a new deal is a great thing for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, before we dive into why it's a great thing and why it's a good thing, let's talk about Trent Williams' current deal with San Francisco. Williams is entering his year 4 of a 6-year contract he signed in 2021, and he'll be entering his age 36 season, showing little signs of slowing down. And in reality, the only thing hindering Trent Williams is maybe the ankle. It's not his body, it's not his age. He moves extremely well still. And again, if he's healthy, when he's healthy, which he usually is, he is the best left tackle in football. But again, the only thing that could hinder him is the ankle injury, which to some is a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. But unless that actually happens, Trent Williams is the best left tackle in football, despite being age 36. Now, keep in mind, Trent Williams' current contract, the one he signed in 2021, the one he is currently going to be in year 4 of, is still the largest contract ever by a left tackle at $138 million. But here's why Trent Williams may want a brand new contract. Now, I want to clarify something that when you hear others say, Williams may want a brand new contract, I think what they're referring to isn't, an entirely new deal that is $140 million, $145 million in total. I think what they're saying is they want him to rework his contract. He wants to rework his contract because despite Williams's total contract being the most ever for a left tackle and an offensive lineman, Trent Williams now ranks 3rd in average salary for left tackles at just over $23 million. So he already is the highest paid left tackle in total. The belief is Trent Williams wants to become the highest paid left tackle per average again, surpassing Laramie Tunsil and Brown, I think is his name, from the New York Giants. But is this Trent Williams being greedy? There are certainly some fans that will say, well, again, we have to pay all these people, but now Trent Williams wants more money at age 36 when he's already making the most ever for left tackle, when he already has the third highest contract for left tackles in NFL history, when he's already guaranteed to be a Hall of Famer, and the only thing left he has to accomplish in his career is winning a Super Bowl and then again becoming a Hall of Famer. Like, his legacy is cemented, no doubt about it, but I don't think this is Trent being greedy, even knowing the circumstances of wanting to pay Aiyuk and having to pay Brock Purdy. In fact, I think it's kind of the opposite. I don't think Trent is looking at this from I need my money and I want it now. He's not a J.G. Wentworth commercial, right? Trent Williams, while yes, wants to get paid more, because who doesn't? I want to get paid more. You want to get paid more. And if they're willing to pay you more, all power to you. Now, that said, this is not Trent being greedy, going into John Lynch's office and Jay York's office and saying, pay me now, I'm not going to play. That is not what Trent is doing. In fact, I think what Trent Williams is doing, if the rumor, the report is to be considered true, is that, one, this means Trent Williams is willing to finish out his contract with San Francisco. And maybe, if all things go well, perhaps playing past his current contract with San Francisco. And I think if that's the case, it puts to bed a lot of the conversation, albeit a future conversation to be had of, are you going to eventually have to replace your Hall of Fame left tackle? If Trent reworks his deal, he's likely committed to playing out the next 3 to 4 seasons with the San Francisco 49ers well into his late 30s, if not his age 40 season. That is one thing to love if Trent Williams gets a new deal. That's basically what that means. He's going to be playing for at least the next 3 seasons, if not 4 years. Because if Trent Williams signs a reworked, restructured contract with San Francisco, his cap hit is going to be lowered this year, next year, and likely in 2 years as well, giving San Francisco enough money to retain players like Brandon Aiyuk, pay Brock Purdy, maybe it's Talanoa Hufanga and Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore and others, right? Maybe Trent Williams wants to rework his deal to help get Aaron Banks paid, right? To keep that left side of the offensive line, Brock Purdy's backside, or blind side, excuse me. I guess blind side and backside, mind you, but can keep him up on his feet, right? I think Trent Williams wanting to rework his deal, when you dive into what his contract actually looks like, he has a $31 million cap hit this season, and it climbs to $34 million, then $37 million the next 2 seasons. Then you add in the void year he has in 2027, where they're going to pay him over $3.5 million. Imagine getting to erase the void year completely, right? Let's say it's a 4-year extension or a 1-year extension tacked on to the rest of his 3 years on his contract. Great. Trent Williams, brand new 4-year deal. No more void year on the books. You ain't got to pay him $3.5 million for him not to play for you. Now you can factor that in towards him actually playing an extra year for you when he's 40 years old. But also on top of that, imagine getting to lower his cap hit from 31 to 25, from 34 to under 30, and 37 to back to, maybe a low 30 number. You are setting yourself up to be able to keep your core together, to sign other free agents, and do exactly what San Francisco did this past offseason, which was, while yes, losing Eric Armstead, but only losing one really integral player on your team, while adding 13 more to help you get better and help the infrastructure of your roster. And look, it's not like Trent Williams doesn't deserve to get paid more money. Now, he's getting paid a lot already, But if Trent Williams comes to you and you're John Lynch and you're Prog Marate and you're Jed York and says, hey, I want to get paid $27 million a year per average, I want to quote unquote reset the market, are you going to tell Trent Williams of all people no? Just like Christian McCaffrey. Were you going to tell Christian McCaffrey, the reigning offensive player of the year, hey, we're not going to pay you top of the market money? No. Of anybody. It's Nick Bosa, it's Trent Williams, it's eventually Brock Purdy, and then Christian McCaffrey. Those are the 3 or 4 guys you're willing to commit, record-breaking contracts to. And you can even argue maybe Purdy isn't in that conversation just yet, but Trent Williams certainly is. Christian McCaffrey already had his deal reworked, and I think that Christian McCaffrey deal they just signed last week or 2 weeks ago now, it's very similar to what I believe Trent Williams wants to get done with the team. He wants to, again, reset the market, quote unquote, per year average money, right? But also it's going to help the team in the long run. Like imagine having extra money to approach the draft, free agency, retaining players, re-signing players, making mid-season trades to put this team over the top. Like that's one thing San Francisco in the last couple of seasons have always had their hand in is the mid-season trade market. Chase Young, Randy Gregory, Emmanuel Sanders, and others to help this team, on their climb towards the Super Bowl. You already have $32 million in cap space now. Many of that will go to Brandon Aiyuk, but if you're lucky and everything works out correctly, you get to add more cap space this year because you can lower Ayuk's cap hit, giving you $36 million, $35 million. Then if you get to rework Trent's deal, maybe you walk into this year and you have $40 million in cap space. Now, that's all wishful thinking. That's all, best case scenario. But you could, in a sense, walk into the 2024-25 season with around 40-ish, maybe high 30s million dollars to work with to help you with midseason trades, to extend players, to carry over into next year when the cap inevitably goes up because the NFL is growing somehow still with their financials. And then you get to pay Brock Purdy and the cap hit's not going to hurt you as much, right? Like Brock Purdy is one of those players where his cap hit's only going to increase despite any deal they get done. So they want to have as much money free as possible. Restructuring Trent Williams goes into that and only helps them doing so. Khalil Young has a comment here on the YouTube chat. And again, if you have any comments, questions, put them in the chat. I will get to them. But he says, let's be honest, Trent did struggle at times in the Super Bowl. No one plays at an elite level forever. Father Time is undefeated. There is just, you can't say anything about it, right? Whether you're LeBron James, you're Tom Brady, you're Michael Jordan, you're some of the greats of the game, Father Time inevitably catches up to you. You're right, Khalil Young. You are 1,000% right, but I'll tell you what, an 85% Trent Williams is better than the top 10 left tackle. Trent Williams, what he can do to help teach others, to be in the locker room and to be on the field is better than 90% of left tackles in football still, even if he, again, starts to slow down somewhat. Like, we shouldn't expect Trent Williams to be what he was in 2021 to what he is now. He's 30 or is going into his age 36 season. We shouldn't expect what he will be this year to be what he is in 2026 when his current contract is over. That's just the case. When you're 36, 37, 38 years old, your body doesn't last as long. And so, yes, there's going to be a time and place where we have to say goodbye to Trent Williams. But I'll tell you this, I think San Francisco would pony up the extra $4-ish million a year if it meant retaining Trent Williams and almost guaranteeing he's on the field for them, or at least committed to playing for them the next 3 or 4 seasons. Because why, if you said no, you're opening up yourself to eventually having to face the question of, do we have to replace Trent? You could have a disgruntled Trent Williams who has, been talking about retiring, maybe say, okay, I'm done. I don't need to make $23 million, right? I can go sit at home with my wife and my kids and live life, and I'm not going to get spurned by the team. Trent could then be granted his actual wants of $27-ish million per year and say, you know what? You did me good, I'll do you good and finish out my contract, which only helps you in the future. So I don't disagree with you. Father Time will eventually catch up to Trent Williams, but you struggle in one game, it doesn't crush your career, right? You're a Hall of Fame left tackle. That would be like telling, Aaron Donald, hey, sorry, man, Father Time. And I get Aaron Donald's going to be a Hall of Famer. So will Trent, defensive tackle, edge rusher, left tackle. There are some obvious nuances in that conversation, but were the Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks telling Jerry Rice no? Terrell Owens had an amazing last season with the Bengals, where he had over 700 yards and probably could have still played the next 2 or 3 years. Father Time, while yes, is undefeated, it's not as if players like Trent Williams haven't held them off in recent history, mainly being Tom Brady. Now, left tackle and quarterback, obviously different, but I would like to think you would agree with me that a 36 to 38-year-old, 39-year-old, maybe Trent Williams is better than a 23-year-old rookie.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Coming out of college, which you don't know. Like, you are going to eventually have to replace him, but I'd rather have Trent Williams for the next 3 seasons locked in, ready to go, than, in 1 year's time be worried about, is he going to come back or not? Okay, that's it for the Trent Williams conversation, because we have to get to bigger news, and that is simply Brandon Aiyuk. Now, sure, could you go from the angle that we already paid McCaffrey, who didn't necessarily need a new deal? Trent Williams now doesn't really need a new deal, and you're going to pay both those guys before Brandon Aiyuk? How would he take that? I would just say paying the reigning Offensive Player of the Year and Hall of Fame protector of Brock Purdy's blindside should take precedent over paying the second receiver on your offense in Brandon Aiyuk. But that said, we got a ton of news regarding Brandon Aiyuk's contract negotiations with the team dating back to last Friday all the way up until about 10 a.m., 9 a.m. this morning. So let's dive into everything Brandon Aiyuk related. Tony, I see your comment in the chat. We'll get to it in about 2 minutes here. Stick with me. Let's go back to last Friday, though. 95-7 the game, my current employer, you could say. They had TJ Houshmandzadeh on, former Seattle Seahawk, former Cincinnati Bengal, current Fox Sports analyst, and current receiver coach to Brandon Aiyuk. He joined 95-7 the game to talk about his client, you can say his friend, his compadre, to talk about where negotiations stand with Aiyuk at the moment. And Houshmandzadeh had a lot of insight. Some I agree with, some I will push back on in the show. So Houshmandzadeh said, if the Niners want to get Brandon Aiyuk signed, give him the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. I guarantee you he'd be at the facility tomorrow. They, being the Niners, don't want to do that. If they offered him Amon-Ra's deal, he would be in camp. So what Houshmandzadeh is saying is, pay Brandon Aiyuk 4 years, $120 million, which is $30 million per year with $78 million guaranteed. And to that I say, okay, you can get into, which receiver's contract should Aiyuk get? How close should they get? Should he be top 5? Should he be this, that, and the other? You can certainly have a conversation of, is Brandon Aiyuk a better receiver than Amon-Ra St. Brown? That can be your plight. You can stick to it. You can fight about it on Twitter with your friends at the bar, whatever you choose. I'm not here to do that. I'm not going to debate who's better in that conversation. All I will say in regards to the Aiyuk and Amon-Ra St. Brown comparison is they are completely different players in a completely different offensive system, used a completely different way. And the reason I say that is because when you dive into their stats, Amon-Ra St. Brown is averaging 143 targets a season over the last 3 years. Averaging 143 targets over the course of the last 3 seasons, which includes 165 targets last year alone. If you add in Amon-Ra St. Brown's 20 rushing attempts, he's touched the football an average of 111 times the last 3 years. We're talking about a work rate amongst the top of the NFL. We're talking you touch the ball almost half of the time for the Detroit Lions. Meanwhile, Brandon Aiyuk has never been targeted more than 114 times in a season. Meanwhile, Amon-Ra St. Brown's lowest targeted total is 119. That was his rookie year 3 years ago with the Lions. Brandon Aiyuk has never had over 80 receptions in a single season. Amon-Ra St. Brown's lowest total is 90. In fact, the last 3 seasons, Aiyuk has averaged 72 touches, and that's including a handful of rushing attempts. I'm not saying do not pay Brandon Aiyuk. I'm not saying Aiyuk isn't worth paying. I'm not even comparing them as players, who's better, this, that, and the other. What I'm saying is that you cannot pay Brandon Aiyuk Amon-Ra St. Brown money knowing Brandon Aiyuk is not utilized in the same offense, in the same way as Amon-Ra St. Brown is. And the same goes for Amon-Ra St. Brown. If he was in San Francisco, he would not be getting $30 million a year because he'd be used an entirely different way in an entirely different scheme. In fact, I would tell you, paying Brandon Aiyuk, do it. I want to keep BA. I think Brandon Aiyuk and Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings is the future of this Niners passing offense. And I think in 1 year's time, if all things, fall how it looks like the dominoes may fall, we'd be saying goodbye to Deebo Samuel. Now that said, you're hoping you can keep all these guys around for the next 2 years. And when Deebo Samuel's contract's up, you can just say goodbye and there's no hard feelings. In fact, I think the idea of paying Brandon Aiyuk $30 million simply doesn't make sense, knowing the offense he plays for, knowing his fit in the scheme, and just simply knowing what other receivers are getting around him, right? I just think you are essentially going to have to pay Brandon Aiyuk receiver number 1 money when for at least 1 year, if not 2 years of his contract, he's not going to be receiver number 1. And in fact, the last 3 years, 4 years of his career, he's never been the number 1, number 2, and at times, not even the number 3 target on the offense. Aiyuk knows this too. He said, I'm the 4th option sometimes in the game plan. Now, that doesn't mean Aiyuk wouldn't be the one on other teams. It doesn't mean that Aiyuk, if you put him on Carolina, he wouldn't get $30 million a year. The difference is he doesn't play for Carolina. He plays for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, there is someone, Tony, in the YouTube chat on Facebook that disagrees. He says, pay Brandon Aiyuk $30 million. Jamar Chase is about to get 34, and CeeDee Lamb will probably get 32. That's another part of the conversation, right, Tony? Where we had all these receivers, wanting to get paid this offseason. And the longer San Francisco waited and saw Justin Jefferson get paid and Jalen Waddle got paid, Amon-Ra St. Brown got paid, CeeDee Lamb will inevitably get paid, right? The asking price will continue to increase on behalf of Brandon Aiyuk's agent. I would push back and say San Francisco has never really cared what others have been paying their players. They see your value and they're going to stick to it. Now, they'll go up and they'll go down a couple $1 million, but if you're asking for $30 million and they view you as, $26 million, $25 million, I have a hard time believing they'll get up to 30. Now, that said, there is more of this conversation that Fluffy Ninja brings up. Good to hear from you again. He says, hey, Sterling, at this point, BA's under contract. Pay him next year or franchise him, but Trent is a huge necessity to keep. So I think that's kind of where I get into this as I hit the mic, where it's like, okay, you're going to pay Trent. He's more important to the team's success. That's an end-all, be-all. That's a given, right? Where you're going to have to pay Trent Williams, and you're going to pay him if he asks for it. Only way you don't pay Trent is if he gets hurt and it's career-ending. Brandon Aiyuk, the more I've read about him, the more the reporters talk about this, it does seem like San Francisco isn't being more fickle with him, but is more willing to let this thing ride out late into the year. And what I mean by that is they'll fine him over and over and over again and hoping he'll come play on the fifth-year option. That way, if he has a great year, they can kind of readjust Deebo Samuel, trade him away, then pay Aiyuk, then bring back Purdy, all these things. So it does feel like San Francisco is at least more willing to test the waters of the Brandon Aiyuk leaving or kind of playing on a one-year contract thing. I don't think they'd pay Aiyuk on the franchise tag. I think it's fifth-year option, and then kind of if you want to leave, you can go, or we can re-sign you to a big year deal. But that goes back to Tony's point. If you let Aiyuk play on the fifth-year option, which he could say no, but only hurts Aiyuk because he doesn't get the accrued season. But let's say they're willing to ride this thing out and Aiyuk plays on the fifth-year option, but then has an amazing year. Like Tony says here, $30 million equals 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, and an all-pro X-receiver number one. Okay, let's say Brandon Aiyuk puts up those exact numbers, Tony. Like you already detailed, he ain't getting $30 million. If CeeDee Lamb puts up $32 million and Jamar Chase gets 34, the asking price only goes up. It would benefit the San Francisco 49ers to pay Brandon Aiyuk this offseason, to pay him during training camp or during the preseason. What it hurts is if they continue to wait and if they have to go to the fifth-year option, and if he has an amazing season, he's going to price himself out of San Francisco. And that's really far down the line, and maybe that's why Pearsall is here in case that happens. There are some that believe Pearsall's play in training camp against Air gives San Francisco leverage. While they have a lot of similarities in skill set and play style, I don't think that's the case. I think Aiyuk would say I've had 4 really good seasons with you, 2 amazing last 2 years, and you don't want to pay me? Now, if San Francisco truly does want to get, kind of be a tightwad with Aiyuk and penny pinch, they could go back and they could look at his stats when they played, the Browns, the Vikings, and the Bengals without Deebo Samuel, and Aiyuk was kind of nowhere to be found. Now, when you are the number one receiver and you don't have your mate next to you, being Deebo Samuel or whoever it is, you're likely going to get double covered because that's who teams know can't beat them, right? That's why San Francisco's willing to let Cooper Kupp beat them because they don't want anyone else to. You feed Cooper Kupp all day, right? You feed him all day. We'll guard Puka. We'll guard everyone else. That's why it was so important for the Rams to find and get Puka Nacua. That's why they tried to get Allen Robinson to get players like Cooper Kupp, or at least get others more involved. When you have more involved, it opens up the entire offense. When San Francisco didn't have Deebo Samuel, Aiyuk was kind of nowhere to be found because he was being double covered. Defense is kind of keyed in on him, and the offense sputtered. Now, there's some nuances there, sure. McCaffrey fumbles against the Vikings. Trent Williams gets hurt. But if you want to get paid like a number one receiver, like Aiyuk does, you have to play like a number one receiver when the number two guy is not there. And that's me kind of being, an ass about it if you want to get serious. Now, I think this is where the report that came out today makes things interesting, because Tony in the comment says Jalen Waddle got $28 million. Tony, you're right. I don't disagree with you. In fact, I believe the sweet spot for a new Brandon Aiyuk contract is the Jalen Waddle deal. But San Francisco doesn't seem to, at least as of now, agree with you or me. According to Mike Silver of the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco 49ers have offered Brandon Aiyuk a $26 million per year deal. Now, we have no idea how long it is. We have no idea what the guarantees are in this reported offer, but San Francisco offered Aiyuk $26 million a year, according to Mike Silver. Now, if you would agree with the fact that Aiyuk didn't play like the number one in that 3-game stretch without Debo against the Browns, the Vikings, and the Bengals, then you would agree he is this team's receiver number 2, which would lend to a Jalen Waddle comparison, or in San Francisco's case, maybe you're kind of towards the bottom end of a Devontae Smith deal with the Eagles, who got $26 million, right? So $26 million is just above Devontae Smith's contract, and it's just under Cooper Kupp's deal. And it feels like San Francisco is telling Aiyuk what his worth, his value is. That you are a really good number 2 receiver, but as soon as you bump that Cooper Kupp number 1 receiver money, that's when we get, hesitant to make a deal with you. I do not agree that San Francisco, or really anybody, would pay Aiyuk above $30 million. Now, maybe in 1 year's time, sure, but I think with where contracts are now, San Francisco will see all these teams pay big money. And they'll say, cool, great, we're not those teams, which will piss off the player on the contract negotiations like Debo, like Fred, like Kittle, like Bosa, and like Brandon Aiyuk. They're unafraid to upset their player, knowing if they get a deal done, you wash your hands and call it a day, and you get back to playing football. But let's say Brandon Aiyuk wants $30 million, and San Francisco said, you know what, we'll give you 26. There's a clear-cut, easy middle ground in this conversation. And Tony, you already said it in the chat. I've already said it in the last show, or maybe it was on Aaron Labigan's show on Niners First Takes, that the sweet spot for a Brandon Aiyuk deal is something similar to Jalen Waddle's $28.75 million per year contract, which is 5th among receivers with $76 million guaranteed. So let's work through this thing here. If Aiyuk wants $30 million, TJ Houshmandzadeh, his receivers coach, says let's pay him the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. Let's combine the 2 contracts of Jalen Waddle and Amon-Ra St. Brown, with the understanding that in 1 year's time, maybe 2 years' time, Debo Samuel will not be here. Don't forget, Debo Samuel is 29 next year. He's going into his age 28 season. Players like Debo usually don't last. I would love to believe the hope is that in 2 years' time, Debo just simply says goodbye, there isn't a contract offer, and he plays out the last 2 years of his contract and has great seasons, right? But we are now in this kind of weird muddied water of, is it a contract year for Debo, knowing he might get traded, or is it a contract year for Aiyuk, knowing that he might have to play on the 5th-year option? To avoid the Aiyuk fiasco, I would give Brandon Aiyuk a 4-year, $15 million deal with $78 million guaranteed. Okay? That is the exact same money annually as Jalen Waddle, and it's the exact same guarantee that Amon-Ra St. Brown got. You're essentially telling Aiyuk, hey, We will give you top 5 receiver money. And then we'll give you the guaranteed money to make you feel more comfortable, like Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you're Brandon Aiyuk and you're just like, I have to have 30, here's $2 million more guaranteed to make you happy. We're not going to meet you for, the 30 annually, but we'll give you the extra $2 million in your pocket right now. And I think for Aiyuk, you would be dumb to turn away that money. Now, you can bet on yourself, and you can sit there, and maybe in 1 year's time, we're sitting back like, man, Aiyuk isn't just top 5, he's number 1. I don't think that's going to happen. There are some, and I think I'm kind of in this camp where, is Brandon Aiyuk a top 10 receiver? Maybe. I don't know. But the way the market's going, you're going to have to pay any top receiver, whether they're top 5, top 10, top 20, they're going to ask for, the next record-breaking deal. And Aiyuk is, again, at no fault asking for $30 million, but the reality is you're likely not going to get 30. And Tony, I see you in the chat again. People told me Bosa wouldn't get 30. He got 34. The difference is Aiyuk ain't Bosa. San Francisco was willing to pay Nick Bosa higher than they expected to because he is a game-changing edge rusher at a premier position at the ripe age of, 25, 26, and they're going to have him for his prime of his contract. Nick Bosa's don't grow on trees. Unfortunately, Brandon Aiyuk's do. Now, San Francisco, I know, has had their tough time finding receivers. I get that. I understand that. But when you're talking about paying somebody like Brandon Aiyuk, who at this point we all love, I love his skills that I think with Brock Purdy as his quarterback, the tandem is phenomenal. I don't want to break that up. You can find the next Brandon Aiyuk where you can't find the next Nick Bosa. Now, again, I'm not saying don't pay Aiyuk. I want to pay Brandon Aiyuk. I want to have him in this offense, in the red and gold, for the next 4 or 5 years. I want to get a deal done. He's a young receiver heading into his prime. The issue is, receivers, although aren't dime a dozens, they just drafted Ricky Pearsall. You can find another receiver eventually. Now, how long is eventually? Could take 2 or 3 years, knowing Shanahan's doghouse, right? Whereas Nick Bosa was a day 1 All-Pro Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. Aiyuk has no awards to his name. Now, does that mean something? Not always. But for Brandon Aiyuk, that's why he was so pissed he wasn't an All-Pro or a Pro Bowler. You can't walk into that room and say, hey, I was an All-Pro. Hey, I was a Pro Bowler. He doesn't have that tied to him. Nick Bosa had that tied to him from day 1 as a number 2 overall pick. Now, I'm not saying, again, pay Brandon Aiyuk, please. Get this thing done. As I hit the mic again, get the Aiyuk deal done. And I think it'll get done. I just think the way things are going, San Francisco's at 26 mil, Aiyuk wants 30. They both want him to stay with the team. He even said in his post-game press conference, or maybe it was a couple of days after, when they lost the Super Bowl, I want to go where I can get paid and where I can win. I'm sorry, do you not already play for a team where you can get paid and win? I'm not worried this thing doesn't get done. I think they do come to terms relatively soon. I think it happens next month. Training camp begins. The two sides start to meet. They have active negotiations, and bing, bang, boom, they're putting pen to paper. They're putting photos on social media. Aiyuk's coming to his press conference to announce the deal himself. I think all that happens next month. And if it doesn't, it'll happen in early August prior to the preseason. But where are things at now? Well, Matt Barrows of The Athletic talked about them not really being contentious, but it's been a difficult negotiation with Brandon Aiyuk. I don't believe this is that big of a deal, but Matt Barrows said that San Francisco drafting Ricky Pearsall was pretty interesting. He's played well in the spring. That's only strengthened San Francisco's stance of, if maybe it is $26 million, like, hey, we got this Pearsall kid back here. very similar to Aiyuk. Maybe we can survive a Brandon Aiyuk holdout where if we win a few games, Pearsall plays well, maybe Aiyuk drops, the price tag somewhat. I don't think that would happen, but here's the part that I have been saying for months and months and months. As soon as the season ended, this last part, the fines will begin to pile up. There is no indication that the Niners will forgive Aiyuk for absences like they did Nick Bosa. That right there, if you've listened to the show, you've watched the show, first off, thank you. Second off, like, share, and subscribe. But if you have, I've been hammering this point home for months. San Francisco is not going to treat Brandon Aiyuk like Nick Bosa. Everyone points to last year, them forgiving the fines, how they treated a once-in-a-lifetime player in Nick Bosa, thinking that's going to carry over into the Brandon Aiyuk negotiations. No, they're different players, different positions, and I can argue Aiyuk is a luxury, Nick Bosa is a necessity to this team's success. I think what's going to happen, honestly, is that we're going to hit the training camp, right? Aiyuk's already lost $100,000. They're going to get to training camp. He'll lose another $100,000. They'll keep finding him and finding him and finding him. And he's going to be like, Jesus, like, okay, maybe I should come down somewhat. I would like to play. Let's get this thing done. Okay, I'll sign the Jalen Waddle $28.75 million deal per year with $78 million guaranteed. That is an easy sweet spot. Their stats are really comparable if you're into that stuff. The way they're utilized are very similar. They're both receiver number twos. I think Aiyuk is a high-end receiver number two with low-end receiver number one capabilities. He's one of the best separators, if not the best separator in football. But in this offense, you're never going to be Justin Jefferson. The only way you're ever going to see Brandon Aiyuk be a number one in the offense is if Deebo Samuel is gone, which could happen in 1-2 years' time, and Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. And even then, you have George Kittle. You're going to have hopefully really good Ricky Pearsall. You're going to have Juwan Jennings, which Aiyuk should play above those guys, right? But Shanahan's offense has never been outside of Julio Jones in Atlanta, because it was like, duh, it's freaking Julio Jones with Matt Ryan. It's never been, a one-man show. And I can argue with Christian McCaffrey in the building now, no receiver that ever comes to San Francisco will be the number one with CMC in the backfield. It's just not going to happen. So Aiyuk's asking to get paid, number one target money on a team that is like, well, you're our number 4 target, my guy. Like, if you're playing for Carolina, if you're playing for, the Patriots and other teams out there, they'll give you $30 million a year. You'll be their receiver number one with, 145 targets like Amon-Ra St. Brown. But here, you're not even going to catch 80 balls. It's just not the case. Now, you can then dive into a conversation of potential. Where could Aiyuk be, without Deebo Samuel in a couple years' time? Could Aiyuk be a, 120 catch player? Maybe, but you're projecting at that point. You don't get paid on projections all the time. I think in this case, you could dive into that somewhat with Aiyuk simply because the Deebo Samuel contract is coming up soon. And I envision them wanting to have an offense that is Aiyuk, Pearsall, Cowing, Jennings, Kittle, and CMC, eventually moving off of Deebo Samuel, allowing and giving Aiyuk the lane to run to become the receiver number one of the team. But I just have a hard time buying into the idea that they're going to pay him $30 million. I don't think Aiyuk is worth $30 million. Now, it's not my money. Who am I to tell someone how to spend their money? If they believe he's worth 30, by all means, pay him 30. I'm not going to complain about it, right? But there are people, content creators, journalists, fans that are like, I'm tired of this. It's been so contentious. this has been maybe one of the easiest negotiations we've ever had, because you had to re-sign Fred Warner. At the time, you had to re-sign Deebo Samuel. At the time, you had to re-sign George Kittle, and you had to re-sign Nick Bosa. I think a lot of people would agree with this statement of like, if you pay Aiyuk, great. If you don't, that sucks. I wish him well. Good luck. Now, again, I want to re-sign Brandon Aiyuk, but if it doesn't happen, to me, this is kind of one of those of like, I wish we could have got it done, but we didn't. We had Pearsall. Let's see what this kid can do. I think a lot of that's in the air of like, those other guys were needs. You're just like the luxury of, cool. If we do, great. If we don't, see you later kind of thing. And, I think it would be different for myself if Aiyuk performed better without Deebo Samuel on the field. I think, George Kittle to fans, I don't want to say the love for him, but, a lot of the fan, he's a great tight end, but in both Super Bowls, he's been utilized like a backup offensive lineman, right? He had one catch last year for a yard. Fans, that wanes on them. Aiyuk, similarly, like, you got jammed against KC. What did you do? Deebo Samuel gets hurt. Kittle isn't being used, or at least is getting guarded well. And Aiyuk's a no-show. Whereas Juwan Jennings has 2 touchdowns, 1 catching, 1 throwing, and he's going to be the MVP. I think a lot of that weighs on fans. It kind of leaves a nasty last impression in their mouth. And I think that's kind of where some people are at too. But, honestly, I'm not going to judge Aiyuk for one game. He saved the season against Detroit. Him, Armstead, and Gibson saved the season, and so did Brock Purdy as well, with the Ladybug catch. I just think that for Aiyuk, I don't know if it's a game plan issue. I don't know if it's a Brock Purdy thing or just the offense, but like, whenever there's no Deebo, there also seems to be no Brandon Aiyuk at times. And I think is one of the reasons as to why San Francisco might be hesitant towards paying Aiyuk what he wants to get paid. But, $26 million, it's not great money. It's not what you want, but it's fine money. It's top tier receiver number 2 money. I think at that point, he'd be the second highest paid receiver number 2 in the NFL. But I think if you're Aiyuk, you're like, well, if you pay me $28 to $30 million, you can't even keep Deebo. So just give me 30, trade him in a year. That way I am your receiver number 1 and no one cares. But time will tell. I don't think it's as contentious or as bad as some fans believe it to be. I think this is just more of it's a good player wanting great money. It's a team saying, hey, you're a good player that we don't want to pay great money to. And I think a lot of it kind of sits there. And I think we're going to sit here for the next 3 or 4 weeks, sitting on our hands, kind of overanalyzing the whole thing and putting ourselves into a flurry saying, why aren't things getting done? When in reality, come August, we're going to sit here and say, oh, the entire team is back and all is well. Let's go on a deep playoff run again. I think that's where this thing is going to end up. I think they pay Brandon Aiyuk, and I think the sweet spot is Jalen Waddle's 4-year, $115 million deal with $78 million guaranteed for Brandon Aiyuk. But what do you think Brandon Aiyuk is worth paying? Would you pay Trent Williams more money? Would you be okay restructuring his deal, freeing up cap space to maybe pay Brandon Aiyuk? Would you give BA $30 million a year simply because you want to keep him around and keep him happy? Or are you on the side where it's like, I like Aiyuk, but that's a lot of money, and we have a lot of mouths to feed? Tell me down below in the comments. You can tag me on Instagram, which is at 49ers.access. You can at me on X or Twitter, 49ers_access. Tell me what you believe Brandon Aiyuk's value is worth. Are you a $26 million man? Are you a $30 million man? Or are you like me, somewhere in between? If you want to go to NBA Finals game, an MLB game, or you're ready to buy your tickets for the upcoming NFL season and see your San Francisco 49ers and maybe see Brandon Aiyuk after his newly signed contract, use our promo code 49ERSAccess, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. My name is Sterling Bennett. Kindly asking you to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on the audio platforms, and as always, we're on our quest for 1,000 subs, just 11 away. Tell 11 friends to subscribe to the show, almost at 1K. And until next time, stay faithful.